So I think the idea here, I was on the previous call last week, and really it's just to get your thoughts and ideas for how we can foster and in this specific breakout, the study of the mechanisms of cognitive aging. And I view this as a quite broadly construed topic. As Carol was just saying, I think this is a continuum. Not only is it a continuum from fully healthy aging, cognitive aging, up to dementia, I actually also think that this continuum could start even younger, but we don't have to go all the way to kids today. But I kind of imagine it as that sort of lifespan cognitive trajectories that we could be really bringing in a big community. But right now, let's not hear my ideas. I'd love to hear other people's ideas, broadly construed. We'll take notes, we can relay back, and please, anyone in any order that you'd like.
Let me just mention, if there's no one jumping right in, I think also one thing that, speaking from the perspective of the psychology department and from the college side, which is where I'm most familiar with our research, one thing when we think about UVA, we think about prominence, the preeminence initiative here, is that this is an area that UVA has actually excelled in a lot of different areas in over the years, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Two things come to mind. One is that our department has had a long-standing interest in lifespan development, starting very early in development and then going through older age. And this both cuts through researchers that are interested in the aging process itself, or interested in, say, in cognitive aging. We had obviously Tim Salthouse here for years, who is a very, very well-known figure in that field, but also into our quantitative group, which has long specialized in dynamical systems and longitudinal design. And that flavor is still really apparent within our quantitative faculty. Several of them, that's their sort of bread and butter, is developing methods for understanding change over time, which is obviously critical when considering aging population and aging research. So in Pear's sort of titling sort of what our breakout room in terms of mechanisms of cognitive change really fits into this well, which is that we recognize, change is something that we can't capture at a single time point. We need, further sort of development, investment, and sort of longitudinal analyses here. But the thing that we really need more innovation on, that we have lacked in, is one is to get more out of the behavioral that we're assessing, and two is to increase our measurement of biological variables in normal cognitive aging, mechanisms of cognitive aging, which is things that we started to take steps on over the last number of years, but we don't have as much expertise in that as we do on the quantitative side of analysis in terms of older styles of behavioral data. And that's kind of where the smaller group of us that are in psychology are talking, and we probably, would be well informed for, making connections across grounds into where other people have expertise and that can help in the areas that we've been lacking through.
So in the last one, Jaideep started calling on people. We could start doing that here too. I'd start going through at the top. So does anyone have any thoughts or large scale ideas, or even smaller thoughts on what could really start to bring us together, not just form more silos within departments, but between departments, between parts, between different colleges here?
I could start with something. So in terms of cognitive decline, so this is Zhongbom Shen from the Department of Neuroscience. in terms of cognitive decline, I think investing into contributing factors that are preventable and modifiable has a promise for, to deliver quick impact, I think. And, I'm kind of pitching here my expertise. I would like to advocate, for example, for two aspects of hearing that are related to the inner ear. The first one is hearing loss as a contributing factor for cognitive decline in the aging population. And the second one is vestibular dysfunction and balance disorders that are that often is the leading cause for falls in aging populations. And to the first one, I mean, in terms of hearing loss, there's overwhelming evidence that hearing loss is correlated and a risk factor for cognitive decline. And there are several hypotheses about the nature of this association. Could be causal. So, I mean, hand-waving social isolation accelerates cognitive decline, right? But there is also a kind of common cause theory where the same cellular degenerative processes cause both hearing loss and cognitive decline. And I think this is very important because all hearing loss often can be prevented by lifestyle changes, hearing aids, and so on. And I think there's a lot of room for collaborations, starting at basic science, like what I'm doing, but also, for example, one could envision engagement of statisticians from public health departments that look at the interaction between hearing loss and dementia, for example. And I'll stop there.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I especially like the fact that this is clearly an interdisciplinary effort, that you can take your expertise, but then collaborations with people quantifying the cognition. So you have to quantify the extent to which your interventions may be having meaningful outcomes here. You've got clinical applications, you have social implications as well. So you could bring in social psychological interventions and studies as well. So great. Any other thoughts on that? Other ideas?
I think he also raises an important point that you have highlighted a specific deficit that could be related to other deficits. But one thing that we have struggled with over the years of doing sort of studies of aging is that we have populations that aren't representative, and they don't we don't capture enough of these interesting deficits that could be telling, and that could point us to some mechanisms. I'll point to Tim Salthouse's BCAP sample, for instance. They were a sample that I think was like a standard deviation above the mean on IQ. They largely were capturing convenience samples of Charlottesville, older folk in Charlottesville, and as those of us that have lived here a while know, there's a lot of people that have retired here that that are of good means and probably aging pretty well, and they were sort of represented more fully in that sample, whereas we didn't have good access necessarily to special populations. So somewhat working across sort of either the health system or even into outreach into areas outside of Charlottesville. I'm thinking particularly as you get into rural areas too, where the NIH has been focused more on sort of being more inclusive and representative, would give us a better picture of what mechanisms of cognitive aging look like, considering most of what we do is model variability, and we end up with a very homogeneous sample. It doesn't help very much. So that's another one of those places that I think would be helpful.
And following up on that as well, it seems to me that one area that the university has shown they've explored this and innovation in this domain in the past, but there's a lot more to be done, and that's telehealth. And so it seems that if we vastly increase the technological capabilities that we have with telehealth, we could then be it's no longer telehealth, because you don't have to just pick up a phone and call someone. You can deploy large scale applications that monitor many aspects of vestibular capability, so balance and movement. We could do hearing tests without having to bring people into a clinic, and also run slews of cognitive tests with them, all computerized, all with this. And then the problem is, this is something that I've worked on myself. The problem that we have here on the developmental level is scaling that up. Getting that infrastructure and the support to get that infrastructure up, the programmers necessary to grow something from something that works inside your lab out to something that can scale to having thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people using it. Any other thoughts? I see Mariana, there she is.
Yeah. May I also contribute with some ideas? Hello, everyone. My name is Marina Telles. I work in the psych department. And well, I see this current moment as a valuable opportunity for researchers like us to investigate the impact of severe social isolation, emotional disorders on the cognitive functioning. And in the same track of our colleague, John Bon, about the preventive actions, I think that we have a good opportunity to study non-pharmacological interventions to remediate cognitive losses, more specifically the cognitive training programs. It's a field that have accumulated evidence of its efficacy for older adults. And the group that most benefit from this type of intervention seems to be the most vulnerable groups, like MCI patients. And so I see a promising room for clinical trials and or interventional studies on cognition for this age group. And I would propose to include the investigation of cognitive training efficacy in a small sample of vulnerable participants. I have, a few years ago, I developed a protocol for lower educated older adults. And this intervention, I tested this intervention in a RCT design in a sample of around 8 individuals. And so, yeah, I'm now working on adapting this protocol for the American context. And yeah, I would love to see your thoughts as well for this kind of intervention in cognitive aging. Thank you.
So that sounds great. That's following up on the same idea of, are there sorts of interventions that we can do that are non-pharmacological that could improve cognitive trajectories? And that's that basic idea here of cognitive trajectories is where the field is largely going, is thinking about measuring cognition and measuring brain state, not just in single points in time, but as in how are you going to evolve through time, and how can we change those trajectories?
Hi, this is Alice Guan. I have
no
suggestion. Sorry, I was kicked off from the breakout room earlier.
No problem.
So, okay, I may miss some discussion, but it seems to me somehow besides, let me see, the characterization or tracing of the cognitive decline, I think actually for us doing the basic science research, I hope this is some kind of the integrating the central mechanism for, well, central mechanism, okay, a little bit presumptuous for the aging that a lot of people in different disciplines can also study. For me, then I would feel actually metabolism and brain energetic is the important aspect, which actually, I just feel that at this time, if you say we want to study the amyloid or want to focus on tau, I think kind of a little bit restricted. But on the other hand, I truly believe, for example, in the tau, that, okay, when the microtubule is affected, probably the mitochondrial function will not be normal, or mitochondrial biogenesis will be affected. So things like this, if we try to use the mechanism, then we can study, okay, metabolism and then the energetic. And then we can think about for basic scientists, or we do transgenic mouse, or we can use biomedical engineering people who study the biometabolism, biosensor, and also behaviors and person, pharmacological, and also I think this could be the way we can integrate basic science research and underlying that is what I truly believe. I think by the end, energy metabolism is underlying the neurodegeneration and aging.
That sounds great. Oh, please.
Well, just put my 2 cents in. I'm Kevin Lee. I'm in the Department of Neuroscience. Recently, recent years, I guess, looking at post-operative cognitive deficits and decline. But I want to give a quick shout out to one of my former colleagues, Heidi Scrabel. Over 2 decades ago, she and I proposed something called the UVA Healthy Brain Initiative, Lifespan Quality Through Modern Neuroscience, as a rubric through which, and it's basically got everybody on here. There wasn't any money involved in it at the time. There was no initiative or anything. We're trying to bring folks together to have an integrated approach to this. And I guess from the perspective of doing this 22 years ago now, no, 24 years ago now, is that, and from my lab, we've brought things into stroke clinical trials, and that's a predominantly older group. And the one thing that when I lecture to the medical students each year is I try to point out to them that the biggest effect you can have on your risk for stroke are modifiable behaviors. And I work at the cellular level. We've got a drug that we've gotten into ambulances to treat people with strokes. And if I were to talk to anybody, I would say to them, really the way you're going to change the incidence of stroke is through modifiable behaviors. So I think the one mistake that we've made over the years, and I put myself in this category as well, we've reached thousands and thousands of kids through our Brain Awareness Week outreach programs. And we go up to Greene County, all of Albemarle, Charlottesville, pre-COVID, obviously, and have been very effective in that. We've had lecture series that have gone out to the aging groups. And I think the biggest missed opportunity is we're not targeting the right people with these outreach programs. You need to get people that are in the key phase of their lives at which risk factors provide the greatest, push the prevalence towards these aging disorders. We focused on stroke over the years. Anyway, we've got 2 or 3 of these things that we've made over the years that basically have everybody involved in it just to try to bring people together, which we've done through the neuroscience graduate program pretty well. But I think that if I were to make one suggestion for this process, is that we would take a single rubric under which we could all live, and it would do a couple things. One, it would bring a broader focus into the neurosciences from the people in different parts of the grounds, and it would maybe foster better collaborations if we could establish overlapping lecture groups that lecture series where we could all get together to talk about these things. I don't, like I said, over the last 22 years, the only magical solution I've seen outside of some of the stroke trials that we've generated are modifiable behaviors being changed and targeting the appropriate populations. Anyway, it's my 2 cents.
So it sounds like we need to try your 20-year-old initiative again.
I've got plenty of drawings like this.
That's great. And I've been part of other similar initiatives too. My previous institution, we created a Center for Brain Health and Performance, which is a similar sort of idea. And then touching back on the idea of metabolism, one of the big pushes was to explore the relationship between the entire body and the brain. So kind of the gut brain connection that that everyone is talking about a good bit these days, and trying to optimize that. And then also the role of sleep and exercise and all of the other modifiable, as you say, these modifiable behaviors that have these quantifiable, tangible changes that often far exceed any sort of pharmacological intervention. Any other thoughts? I don't know how much time we have left here, but it'd be great to, oh, 5 minutes left. There it is. Perfect. And that was 2 minutes ago, though. So we're down to about 3 minutes.
Does anyone know how active we used to have an institute for aging, right? I think, does anyone know how active that institute still is?
I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, it was the institute that has been formed when Paul Baltus was here. And the Life Institute is actually, some of it is still continuing in collaboration with the Max Planck and and 2 other US institutions here. I think there is a huge potential there to tap into that because its international collaborations are already in place. And also they had, while it was active here, it was a really large outreach program that went into the aging facilities and so on. Was Kevin was mentioning that there are a lot of kind of seminars and outreach programs that are going on.
Yeah, I think if we revive such an institute, it's a perfect vehicle, I think, to synthesize a lot what we are talking today. I mean, the contributing factor to aging and then focusing on those that are modifiable. And it could, I think, bring together basic science all the way to, I mean, the psych department as well. I think that should be explored.
Kevin, did I see you starting in a second ago?
Yeah, I was gonna just resonate to the idea of thinking about this in terms of a lifespan perspective, because of so much of, you know, sort of shockingly, so much of what predicts healthy brain development we find is extremely early prenatal factors, and then what predicts aging can well be that plus, you know, the modifiable behaviors that were referenced, especially around the adolescent period. So that notion of taking a real lifespan perspective. And then just to plug in for, there still remains a completely uncharted territory of aging in neurodevelopmental disorders. I think there's still just 1 or 2 papers in the field of autism on how the autistic brain ages, and that you know, obviously unites a strength that the university has invested in heavily with another strength that the university has invested in heavily in terms of aging. So I think you will find very welcoming colleagues for collaborators for that type of work.
That's tremendous. I really love, I keep coming back to this idea of being drawn to this idea of some sort of center for lifespan, lifespan development, lifespan cognition, because so much of, for example, in dementia, we're trying to identify markers as soon as possible so that we can develop those interventions and get interventions. And we can't start at 65. Ideally, we're starting in neonatally even.
Yeah, one could imagine recruiting a birth cohort from, you know, the Charlottesville and then surrounding areas, but instead of just recruiting mom and baby, which is kind of usually what people mean by birth cohort, recruit, you know, mom, baby, dad, parents, and grandparents, and now you've got a cohort design that's mixed, longitudinal, cross-sectional, and then you can, of course, recruit controls that are unrelated and begin to follow them over time, but it would demand both the use of technology, but also, kind of going out to the families. You guys have heard me talk about the tour bus with a magnet and EEG, eye tracking and all that, but that's the way you're going to get the walking through downtown standard deviation above folks, is to really go out to their homes and measure them. And I think that that type of cohort would be incredibly unique, and address a really big problem, in the field, where for example, all the imaging cohorts we have are imaging of professors' kids, around major cities that have 3 Tesla Prisma magnets and strong connections to NIH program officers. And so we know a lot about baby brains, of one particular type of baby. So it would be great to get some attention to that rural Appalachian, which would then tie us into pain and addiction very rapidly, unfortunately. Aging, of course, development, of course, and autism, obviously, all the things that were identified as, but we need that support for that cohort.
Well, this has been great. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts on this and for doing this work, which I hope we'll figure out ways to get everyone together here now that we have 10 seconds before they're going to put us back into close our breakout room. So we'll see you back in the main room.